Well, I do want to just make a comment on the first verse that was read, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is the Aramaic for the first sentence of the 22nd Psalm. Back in Jesus' day, the Bible hadn't been numbered the way it is now, and the Psalms weren't necessarily collected into the order. You say the 22nd Psalm and people wouldn't know what that was, but the Psalms were known by their first line. And so when someone would refer to the first line of a psalm, it would bring to mind the whole psalm. So instead of the 23rd Psalm, we might call it, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And then the rest of the psalm would come into mind. And so if you read the rest of Psalm 22, this is actually in the form of what's called a lament. Anybody know that word? You heard lament? There's a book in the Bible called Lamentations. And a lament is kind of like a complaint. But it's not that I'm complaining to you or to Dr. Beck. These kids these days. No, a lament is where I take my burdens to God, who knows what to do with them. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes it's a correction. And sometimes he's going to act. But the point of a lament is that I'm not pouring my heart out to somebody who can't do something about it, but I'm pouring my heart out to God, who can. And then lament often ends with praise. So we start with complaint or, pouring our heart out to God, and it ends with praise because we know we're talking to somebody who can do something about it. The only one who can meet every single need. And so if you were to read all of Psalm 22, you'd come across verse 27. It says, all the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. So we're praying for salvation and remembering these words of Jesus, which call to mind Psalm 22. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before you. For kingship belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. So we can pray with hope and confidence for the people on this board. That Jesus, even as he was on the cross, had in mind that all the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before him. The person whose name I wrote is a Hindu and very averse to the gospel message as I presented it. So I'm praying for God to send someone else into her life who she can hear from. She had lots of reasons not to like me in our last encounters. Okay, let's switch over to economics. Would someone pray for our Beckonomics class here? Who's going to pray for us? Go ahead. Say your name for me.
Jace.
Thank you, Jace. Go ahead.
Dear God, thank you for this class, and just thank you for Mr. Knowlton and coming in to teach us today, and just please help his teaching to go smoothly and for all of us to understand what he's saying and to give him our full attention. Yeah.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Jace. Okay, so I have a belief, which is that our system works better than all the other economic systems. There's other economic systems you could think of from history. Can you just name any others that are not the one that we use? Communism, sure. What else? Fascism, yeah. That's more of an economic or a governmental style. Often contained control of the economy. Others? Think farther back in history. Monarchies or feudalism, yeah. Serfs and then some knights or lords who had to pay tribute to the kings. Others? Marxism? Yeah, sort of a religion. Yeah, it has elements of religion. Yeah, that's sort of the theory behind communism, which is the way that the economics get worked out. Socialism, is a little bit, maybe a little less strict than communism. Yeah, so there's these other systems. When Dr. Beck and I were in high school, we were in the middle of or near the end, we didn't know it, but we were near the end of a Cold War with the Soviet Union. And the reason that, well, who won, by the way? Who won that Cold War? Nobody? Well, the Soviet Union's gone and we're still here. So I say we won. And we won by the force. It wasn't a shooting war, right? We didn't have tanks rolling into Stalingrad, and they didn't have, missiles attacking Richmond, Virginia. It was an economic war of which system, the USSR, Soviet Union, it was the Soviet Socialist Republics. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So they were socialist right in their name, USSR. Yes, Russia is the largest country in the USSR. Yep. And so it was a battle between communism and the system of communism, the economic system, and the economic system of free market capitalism. And free market capitalism won. So I think our system is the best, not because of my prejudice, because of the evidence of where were people more prosperous. One of my friends went to Russia right at the end in 1992, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the toilet paper had visible wood chips in it. Breakfast was, and this is an honored guest, breakfast was a clear Jell-O with no sweetener with last night's dinner leftovers. That was breakfast. Now, our system has some problems. Maybe our food's a little too tasty. But our system produces more prosperity and human flourishing than any other system that has ever been known to man. So why does our system work better than all the others?
It's because everybody can contribute to it.
Everybody can contribute, yeah. Now, socialists would say, from each according to his ability, to each according to his work. That's sort of the maxim of socialism. So they expect everybody to contribute. I think one of the differences, though, is that we can retain the fruit of our labor, whereas it's not appropriated by the government and then redistributed. Some of it is called taxes, but we do have a system where we largely get to retain the benefit of our work. And in a business, in the finances of a business, we call that profit. And so there's a profit motive. Adam Smith, have you talked about Adam Smith in this class? Somebody remember?
Yes.
The wealth of nations, which is a term from Isaiah. Smith talked about the profit motive, the desire and ability to he's got the book right there. To retain the profit that you make drives me to want to serve you. In other words, in a system where we have the ability to buy from and sell to whomever we want, I have a real reason to want to make you happy so that you give me your money. And this is a biblical principle. Jesus said, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. In other words, we have to serve each other in this system in order to get money. In a socialist system or a communist system, you get money simply because you exist. And there's no reason for you to try to serve anybody. Our system highly incentivizes good service and making other people better. And also, Jesus said, the golden rule, whatever you wish others would do to you, do also to them. And so we've built into our economic system incentives that align with Jesus' principles. Socialism or communism, where the government sucks up whatever sort of surplus is created and then redistributes it based on simply your existence, there isn't really an incentive to do well. We also have what is called rule of law. So it's predictable. We have laws, and if someone violates them, then we can go to court, or there's enforcement mechanisms, you know, that there's various agencies, and the government will support the rules. And so we have a predictable scheme of how the rules will be applied. And so as long as that is true, they call it rule of law, then it's, I'm willing to invest in start a new business, because I know that if John Marie, you know, steals my intellectual property, I can go to court and the courts will enforce it and make him give me the profits that he essentially stole from me. I don't think John Marie would do that, but if he did, and our system allows for mostly free trade amongst voluntary participants. I already talked about this a little bit, but we may choose, you know, we could have 10 shoe stores in town, and you can go to the shoe store that you like. And because there's multiple shoe stores, each of them wants to do a great job of serving their target market. If there was only one shoe store, that's called a monopoly, then that's kind of like the cable company. Well, we'll show up between 10 and July. So it's a monopoly system. The service is poor. Nobody likes the cable company's service. So they don't have competition. So free trade amongst voluntary participants produces great outcomes. And then there's something called comparative advantage and specialization. So comparative advantages, maybe you've heard the president talking about how, you know, other countries have ripped us off and they've exported our factories and all of that. Well, if people in, let's say, Vietnam will work for $10 an hour and factory workers in America want $40 an hour, that is a comparative advantage, lower cost. Or if we have a huge number of colleges that produce highly trained business consultants, and we export business consulting all around the world, it's not that we're taking advantage of people in Europe, it's just that we have a comparative advantage, that we've got this great labor pool of well-educated, smart people. And then specialization. And this is one that Adam Smith really makes a strong point of in the Wealth of Nations. Just imagine if instead of the living in 2025, it was 1825. Mr. Bronson had not yet settled Kalamazoo. We're in the woods, somewhere in the wilderness of Michigan. And we really don't have any neighbors. And so if we want food, we need to grow it. If we want a house, we have to build it. If we want shoes, we have to make them. And that's true for everybody. Why didn't they have iPhones back in 1825? Well, there's no way for you to make an iPhone or me to make an iPhone. There's no way for one person to make an iPhone or almost anything else. We specialize. Jean-Marie's great at baking bread, so he becomes the baker. And Gabby is great at, doing taxes, so she does the taxes for everybody. And Devin's really good at eating the bread. No, I'm just kidding. But as we specialize, then we actually generate some surplus. And I can sell to you the extra, or John Marie could sell to you the extra bread that he makes, and you can sell to other families the extra clothes that you make, and we all get more prosperous because we specialize and get really good, as opposed to all of us trying to do everything all the time. So those principles, the biblical principles of serving, the rule of law, free trade amongst voluntary participants, and comparative advantage and specialization make our system of capitalism better and more prosperous than all the other ones. Which then leads to a question that you may have considered, which is, why should we seek to prosper? And so this is something I'd like you to answer. Maybe you want to challenge the question. Maybe that's a bad supposition. But why do you think it might be good for us to seek to prosper?
If there's more opportunities in the next generation.
Gives opportunities to the next generation, sure. Yep. Why else?
Could you give a definition of prosper?
Sure. Could you? It's a Bible word.
But it is succeed.
So when I say prosper, what I mean is to experience financial and material increase.
I guess for a nation to be a nation, we need to have like a financial system.
Okay. Yep. To be a healthy nation. Sure. How about individuals or families? Why should families seek to prosper?
Be comfortable,
Okay.
provide for the family, so they don't end up poor.
Poverty is terrible. It's a curse. Poverty is horrible. Prosperity is part of our heritage. Deuteronomy 8:18 says, oh man, I am the Lord who gives you the power to get wealth, that I may confirm the covenant that I swore to your fathers as it is this day. It's part of our covenant with God. I am the Lord who gives you the power to get wealth. I have 16 pages of Bible quotes on prosperity. If you want them, I'll give them to you. Jesus said, Luke 6:38, he said, give and it shall be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be put into your lap. So prosperity is a result of giving. In other words, the whole value creation cycle starts with giving. Jesus says, give and it will be given to you. Give and it will be given to you. My wife one time asked me, why is it so important to you, John, to make money, to prosper? And I said, I had to think about it. Why was it important to me? But the answer is, it is proof that I've provided value. When I receive value, it's proof to me. And because it's freely given, nobody's under compulsion to give me money. So it's proof that I've provided value to somebody else. And there's excess value, right? Give and it should be given to you. And it's this image of like overflowing more than you could hold. The idea there in Luke there is that, back before pants were invented, people wore these tunics or whatever it was, and that you kind of open it up and make a big pocket here in your robe, and that it's overflowing. Give, and it should be given to you overflowing. So prosperity is evidence of God's faithfulness and our participation in value creation. Okay, so I'm going to get to stocks. Don't worry, I have 14 minutes.
That's good.
Teach you everything you need to know about stocks. Do you believe that? I don't, but we can have faith, right? So I really want you to participate. What are some of the ways that people generate money or they generate prosperity? What do people do?
Investment.
They invest. What else? Work a job. Yeah, absolutely.
Business.
They can start a business or run a business. Yeah.
Inherit.
What about I've heard that you're a bond guy, John Marie.
Oh, I only do stocks right now.
You only do stocks? Okay. Some people lend money. And if you buy a bond from a government or a business, then you're lending them money.
I thought you were a bond guy, John. Did I get that wrong?
Yeah.
She said he was.
Yeah, yesterday you
I
Overnight, he's not anymore.
Yeah, he's changed it.
All right, okay.
He sold them all overnight.
I didn't want to leave Mr. Nolan astray.
Yields went up 200, so he sold all his bonds, and now he's a stock
In
guy.
about 5 minutes, you might be back to mine.
We don't know. Once a year is okay.
One of the most amazing ways to prosper and to make money is to own a business that you don't have to run. So I've run lots of businesses, and they take a lot of work. You have employees, and they want to be paid. and they want to know what their benefits package is, and they want to know if they get days off, and they want, right? I mean, my gosh, they have all these questions. And then you have customers, and they want you to actually deliver the service that they paid for or product. Right. And then there's the government, and they want you to pay all these taxes and stuff, and then you have to pay your rent to your landlord. Right? It's a lot of work. But owning a business that you don't have to run is amazing. It seems almost magical sometimes. And we have a mechanism that's about 400 years old called the stock market. And the stock market is the greatest passive wealth generation machine known to humanity. The stock market is essentially, it's a mechanism by which we can own a little bit of a big business. And as they make money, we make money. So companies will sell part of themselves on a stock exchange for a couple different reasons. The main one being they need a bunch of money to expand the business. So most businesses are started by some entrepreneurs, and they what's called bootstrap it. They sort of pay for it out of their savings, or they borrow money from their friends and family, and maybe they get some early investors in the company. But at some point, there's come some reason why they need to get a lot of money. And so they may say, well, we'll sell a half of our company's value into the stock market. And then those stocks, those shares, it's called, of that company get traded between participants on the stock market. Now, stocks can make money a couple different ways. The first is the price of the stock can go up. Now, the reason that a stock's price might go up is that the company reports more sales or more earnings. They're making more money. And so the overall market assesses the value of that company as being higher. And so the price can go up. Some stocks pass profits back to the shareholders, and they get paid out what's called dividends. Not all companies do that, but some do. And that's the second way that you can make money with stocks, is through dividends. And so you can buy the stock at $10 a share. Maybe it goes up to $15 a share because the company is run well and they're reporting more earnings, they're making more money. And so the market says, oh, each of those shares is worth more. And so then you could sell it for $15 and you just made $5 a share. If you held that stock, maybe they pay a 50 cents dividend every year. And so you put in $10, right? That was your cost, was $10, and they pay out 50 cents. That's a 5% dividend. And so you could hold it for 10 years and you would have made $5 in dividends. And so you just made money. And then maybe the stock price also went up. Now, stock prices can go up, and what else can they do? They could go down. Why would they go down?
Tariffs.
Terrorists?
Tariffs.
Tariffs. They might go down because of tariffs. Okay, I expected a tariff question. I will take questions in 4 minutes, okay?
The value of the thing goes down, like the company.
The company goes down for what reason? Why would it go down?
Losing money, they're going bankrupt.
They're going bankrupt. They're not run as well. Their market dried up. There's no longer a good fit between what they sell and what the market wants. They go. It's a clothing company. They go all in on skinny jeans right when everybody goes to bell bottoms. Oops. Right? Oh, we missed it. So that's a bad fit between what they're making and what the customers want to buy. Yeah. Why else could it go down? So let's take the tariffs idea, Jace. Why would tariffs cause a stock the price of a company's stock to go down?
The economy just gets worse.
They pay more to get
Their costs go up because they have to pay more tax or tariff. Tariff is a type of tax. Yeah. So they're actually going to make less money. Sure. Tariffs also suppress the total amount of economic activity. If you want less of something, tax it. Seriously. The government wants people to smoke fewer cigarettes, they raise the tax on cigarettes. Yeah, so generally the lower amount of economic activity could depress the price of all kinds of stocks. The whole market could go down, and that happens. All right, let me tell you my rules or requirements for stock market success, and then I'll ask your questions in the last 5 minutes. My default is to own the market, not a company, but the broad market. So there are things called stock indices or indexes. You may have heard of that. Can anybody name one of the stock indices? Jumri?
Oh, I invest in a couple of them. Are you talking about index funds?
Well, index funds track an index. And so what are some of those indexes?
Like Nike and...
Nike's an individual company, which is also part of the, for example, S&P 500. So the S&P, Standard & Poor's, is just a company that does analysis. They've just assembled a list of the 500 biggest companies in the United States. And that list is the S&P 500 index.
But is that 500?
There are 500 in it, yep. And then there's the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Maybe you've heard of the Dow. That's 30 stocks, first assembled by Charles Dow over 100 years ago. There are other indexes. My first rule is to own the market. If I buy something other than the market, I discipline myself to write an investment thesis. So, yes, I'm that nerdy. I type a paper about why am I buying something other than the market. If I'm going to buy this Nike, I must think there's a compelling reason why Nike will do better than owning the whole market. And I force myself to list my reasons. Why am I buying this? And then what are the conditions under which I would sell that and go back to the market? So one of my friends bought Donald DJT is the ticker symbol for Donald J. Trump's media empire, his Truth Social and that. And he was complaining to me that it went down in value. And I'm like, well, what was your investment thesis? And he said, my what? I said, well, you obviously thought it would do better than the market, so what were your reasons? And he said, I'm not going to buy any individual stocks anymore. Okay, so that's my rule for me is to own the market. I think the U.S. overall stock market is the greatest passive tool for generating wealth that man has ever known. Second is to buy consistently. Consistently buy, regardless of price. Buy. When you get a job and they have a retirement plan, they'll take money right out of your check and you put it right in the market. You don't worry about it. Buy the market. Every paycheck. Buy the market. Buy the market. Buy the market. Don't try to guess which company to buy or sell, unless you have a really compelling reason and you can write it down and articulate it. Here's one that's really hard. So the stock market is easy to make money in, but it's emotionally difficult. This is actually, being a successful investor is an emotional competence test. Can you buy when everybody else is scared and selling? And can you sell when everybody is jubilant and celebrating? The successful investors are the ones who can discipline themselves. That even when I'm scared because tariffs, because terrorism, because name the next thing, and there's been 1 million of them and there'll be 1 million more, I'm going to buy anyways. I like it when Arby's is on sale. I like it when Mike and Ike's are on sale. Why don't I like it when stocks are on sale? People just have a really hard time buying when prices are down and holding on. And then develop an investment thesis for every position you own. Okay, questions. We have 3 minutes. Jean-Marie.
Would you advise on investing in bonds?
Okay, so bonds are another type of investment. You're actually lending money to the issuer. So the federal government issues bonds and you lend money to them. They promise to pay you some interest, and then at the end of the time, they give you your money back. They tend to be have less month-to-month price fluctuations. For a young person starting out, I wouldn't fool with them. Close your eyes and buy stocks.
Yeah.
Next question. See, he's a bond guy now.
I had a question real quick, if no one else at the moment has a question. When a company decides to go from private to public and do an IPO, how do they determine the number of shares or stock, like Facebook, where they went public? How do you determine, would it have 1,000, would it have 50 million? How do you have any idea how? I mean, how would
Yeah,
they do
so
that?
they always hire an investment banker, Goldman Sachs or somebody like that, to assess the market and sort of the appetite for how much the market would buy of their company. And so there's this negotiation back and forth over how much of the company are they going to sell, and that's generally driven by how much they need. Often they're trying to cash out original or early investors,
Okay.
and those investors are like, "Hey, I gave you 10 million. I want my 500 million now. I want a 50x return." And so that drives how much money they need to raise, and then their investment banker will assess how much the market might pay for how many shares or what percentage of the company they would have to sell in order to raise that much money. Yep. Let's go over here. Okay. Jean-Marie, you're not going to let him ask all the questions, all right? Because we're going to be talking about bonds. You know we're talking bonds.
No, what is
What?
a shell company, and can you invest in a shell company?
In a what?
Shell company.
Shell company?
What is it?
A shell company is a company that it exists to own other companies. And yes, you can do that. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company, was a textile miller, but they own Geico Insurance and Coke and American Express and all kinds of things. So yes, you can.
All right, let's give a round of
That's it.
applause. Thank you so much.